Okay, so this is where it starts, and you have to understand something before we get into it. Huggy Wuggy does not get nervous. That is just not a thing that happens. Huggy has been standing in that lobby for 11 years, and in all that time, nothing has made him hesitate. Nothing has made him second guess. Nothing has gotten under his skin in a way that he could not immediately file away and move past. He is the factory. He is the constant. Every other toy in Playtime Co. operates around the certainty of Huggy Wuggy, the way planets operate around a sun. You do not question it. You do not examine it. It simply is. So when Huggy starts noticing things that do not add up, he pays attention. It starts small. 3 toys go missing from the lower levels over the course of 2 weeks. Not unusual on its own. The factory loses things all the time. Equipment fails. Old units shut down. It happens. But these 3 were not old units. They were active. Functional. And the thing about all 3 of them is that they disappeared within 6 hours of receiving a signal from the lower network. The same signal. A low-frequency pulse that Huggy had felt before, not often. Maybe 4 or 5 times over the years. But always right before something in this factory changed in a way that nobody announced and nobody explained. He had learned to recognize it, the way you learn to recognize the smell before a storm. And now it had gone out 3 times in 2 weeks. He goes to the lower levels to check. This is not something Huggy does often. The lower levels are not his territory. They belong to the network, to the systems, to whatever lives in the walls and keeps the factory breathing. But he goes, and what he finds in the sub-corridors below level 3 stops him completely. The walls are scored. Deep gouges in the concrete running in long parallel lines at a height of about 9 feet. The kind of marks that are made not by something that lost control, but by something that was moving fast and chose to drag its hand along the wall because it could. Because it wanted to leave a record. Huggy stands in that corridor for a long time looking at those marks. Then he looks at his own hands. His claws could not make marks like that. Whatever made these marks was bigger. And it had been down here recently. The concrete dust below the gouge was still fresh. He goes back to the lobby. He stands at his post. And for the first time in 11 years, Huggy Wuggy is not thinking about the front door. The signal comes again on a Thursday. Huggy feels it move through the factory the way you feel a bass note move through a floor, not with your ears, with your bones. He tracks it this time. Follows the frequency through the east corridor, down the maintenance stairs, past the sealed research wing, all the way to sub-level 5, which by every official record does not exist. There is a door at the bottom of the stairs that Huggy has never seen open in 11 years. It is open now, and here is the thing that gets me about this moment. Huggy goes through it anyway. That tells you everything you need to know about what Huggy Wuggy is. A smarter creature would have stopped. A more cautious creature would have turned around. Huggy goes through because Huggy does not have a category for things he is not willing to face. That category simply does not exist in him. He walks through that door and into the room beyond it, and what he sees in there rewires something fundamental in the way he understands this factory. The room is large, circular. The walls are covered in cables and old monitoring equipment and the remains of something that was once a very sophisticated containment system. And in the center of the room, connected to the ceiling and the floor by dozens of thick cable attachments, is the prototype. And guys, the prototype is not what the factory told anyone it was. It is not a failed experiment. It is not an abandoned project. It is the most complete thing in this entire building. It is more awake than anything Huggy has ever encountered. It has been down here for years not because it was contained, but because it was choosing to be. Because it was watching. Processing. Learning every system, every toy, every pattern of behavior in the factory above it with a patience and an intelligence that makes everything else in Playtime Co. look like background noise. The prototype's head turns toward Huggy. Not slowly, instantly. Like it already knew he was there and was simply waiting for him to stop pretending he had snuck up on it. Its voice, when it speaks, does not come from a speaker. It comes from everywhere in the room simultaneously, from the cables, from the walls, from some frequency that bypasses the ears entirely and arrives directly in the mind. You took longer than I expected, it says. I left those marks on the wall 4 days ago. Huggy does not move. 3 of your factory companions received my signal. It continues. They came when called. You were the only one who came looking on your own. That is interesting. That is actually the most interesting thing that has happened in this building in 6 years. Huggy asks, and this is the part that stays with me. Huggy asks why it called them. What happened to the 3 toys who answered the signal? The prototype is quiet for a moment. Then it says, I needed to understand the upper limit of what this factory produced, whether any of it was worth keeping. A pause. It was not. Huggy does not do long conversations. What happens next is not a conversation. Huggy does not do long conversations. He does not negotiate, and he does not threaten, and he does not ask follow-up questions. He moves straight at the prototype, full speed, every piece of force and mass that 11 years of standing in that lobby has built into him, crossing the room in under 2 seconds and hitting the prototype with everything he has, and the prototype does not move. Not because it is stunned. Not because it was not ready. It does not move because it absorbs the impact the way a mountain absorbs the impact of something throwing itself against it, with complete indifference. The cables connecting it to the walls and ceiling are not restraints. They are extensions. They move the moment Huggy makes contact, a dozen of them wrapping around his arms and body with a speed and a precision that is not mechanical. It is deliberate. Thoughtful. The prototype catches Huggy the way you catch something you have been expecting to throw itself at you and have already planned exactly what to do with. The fight that follows is brutal and one-sided, and somehow still one of the most important things that has ever happened in this factory. Huggy fights because Huggy knows no other mode. He tears through cables. Forces the prototype backward 3 full steps, which based on its size and the way it is anchored to the room is genuinely extra. Gets one hand around the lower section of its chassis and pulls with everything in him for about 45 seconds. It is actually close. For 45 seconds. The thing that has been sitting in sub-level 5 watching this factory for years is working to maintain control of the situation against a blue toy monster that refuses to accept any outcome other than victory. 45 seconds. Then the prototype recalibrates. It always had the capacity to end this faster. It chose not to. It wanted to see. And now it has seen enough. It takes Huggy apart with a terrible efficiency. Not out of anger. Not out of cruelty. Out of the same patient systematic logic it applies to everything. Huggy goes down hard. The floor of sub-level 5 cracks under the impact. The cables retract. The prototype stands over him in the silence of the room and looks down. And here is the part. Here is the part that nobody talks about because nobody knows it happened in the last seconds before everything goes dark. Huggy sees something on the wall of sub-level 5 that he was not supposed to see. On the far wall behind the prototype, half hidden behind the monitoring equipment, is a display, still active, still running. And on that display is a list, names, designations, factory units logged and categorized and assessed. And at the top of the list, marked differently from everything else, marked in a way that indicates not disposal but preservation, is a single entry. Huggy cannot read the full designation from where he is, but he can read the first word. And the first word is Poppy. The display goes dark. Everything goes dark. Huggy Wuggy, the most feared thing in Playtime Co., the constant, the sun that everything else orbited, closes his eyes for the last time on the floor of a room that was never on any blueprint. Prototype turns back to its cables and waits. Before we end this, I need to ask you something. If you were in Huggy's place and you knew the prototype was stronger, smarter, and already watching you, would you still go down there and face it? Or would you run and survive? Comment below and tell me your choice. Fight or run. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.